Get started. And thank you again, everybody, for joining us for today's webinar, which is all about how the Demandbase team uses AI to streamline contract review. So before we go ahead and dive into today, a little bit of an overview about what we're going to be discussing. So David and I will start by first talking about how Demandbase generally thinks about AI, especially as it relates to the legal team. And then we'll double click into the application of AI in their NDA review process specifically, and really what the impact of that new AI powered process is on the business. And then we'll also talk about the future vision. Where do they want to go next? From there, we'll make sure to save some time for some live Q&A from you all. I know many of you have questions that are very top of mind as it relates to this topic. So please make sure throughout today's conversation, if any questions come up, just go ahead and drop that in the Q&A tab, and our team will be monitoring those to make sure we can get through as many as possible. So we're excited to get started, and we'll start with introductions. My name is Brooke Adair. I see some friendly and familiar names in the chat. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining. I lead our mid-market commercial sales team here at Ironclad, and I'm lucky enough to be our moderator today. I've been with Ironclad for 5.5 years. So over that time, I've been lucky enough to have a front row seat to the way that AI has evolved the contracting space, obviously with that being especially top of mind over the last few years. And we get the pleasure of being joined by Dave Mitchell, the VP of Legal at Demandbase. So Dave, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Brooke, and super excited to have the opportunity to talk with you today. Hearing you say you've been with Ironclad for 5.5 years, I think you said. So I think we've been with Ironclad for 7 years, so we've kind of got you beat on that. I'll keep my bio short, as I know we do have a lot of content to go over. So I'm from New Zealand originally, started my career in private practice in New Zealand, and then I spent 19 years at Oracle, initially in the UK for about 3 or 4 years, and then in 2000, at the end of 2000, I moved to the Bay Area, where I am now. The first half of my career at Oracle, I was a commercial attorney, and we sort of strategic initiatives, as we called them, deals as well. But then in the second half, I had various business roles, including an M&A, strategy, and most relevant to this conversation today, I supported Oracle's research function, which is called Oracle Labs. And among the various interesting projects there were some early efforts in AI, so in natural language processing and machine learning. But obviously, we've come a long way since then. I joined Demandbase in 2019. I was initially the sole in-house attorney, but since then we have expanded the team to 4 attorneys, and we have 4 contracts, privacy, compliance professionals. In the same time frame, Demandbase, which is an advertising marketing tech company, we've transitioned from being the creator and leader in a sort of niche space called account-based marketing for enterprises. We've grown to be now an 800-person plus, I think, company. We're global, and we're supporting sort of a broad array of go-to-market motions for sales, marketing, and other functions like customer success.
Thank you so much for that background and recap. It's so fascinating to hear, going from an Oracle world, multiple decades in that space, and watching the evolution of Oracle to now being in this startup world that you and I both get to live in. And to go from a legal team of 1 to 8 is amazing. I'm sure there's a lot of questions from the audience about that journey specifically. And we're just so glad we get to have some time with you today. So thanks again for taking the time with us. I said this earlier, but if you have any questions come up, we have a Q&A label right there that you can click into to drop your questions, and our team will be monitoring those, and we'll try to get through as many as we can. So Dave, I really want to start at the beginning. I'm curious for the Demandbase team. Once AI started to really become the hottest topic in tech, everybody really started having it top of mind. What was the initial sentiment from your team about AI?
Yeah, and I think it was the hot topic in life, right? So I remember distinctly we had a team meeting, I guess it's a little over 2 years ago now, where ChatGPT 3 had its incredible public release, and in the meeting, the majority of us had come into the meeting having sort of played around with it, written rhyming poems for birthday cards and the like. And I just remember the meeting was kind of buzzing, and we got totally diverted on what was going on with ChatGPT. And you could see the potential for generative AI, but we couldn't, of course, 2 years ago foresee the pace of the change and how the generative AI ecosystem would sort of so quickly move over into the enterprise space and into supporting vertical professions like ours. But as I say, you could see that it wasn't a fad, and it was also something that was obviously not going to take a long time to gain traction, like in our space, I guess, smart contracts, for example. But I was listening to a podcast recently, and there was a gentleman, Jeffrey Deng, who's a political science professor at George Washington University, talking, and he was referring to AI as being what he called a general purpose technology, so GPT, the acronym again. And he made the point that unlike other breakthrough technologies, and today you can think of something like EVs, which really are incredibly impressive and they're revolutionizing transportation. Unlike that, though, AI is going to be something that transforms virtually every aspect of our lives. So, just thinking about our domain, the legal domain, even if, and maybe many people on this call, even if you're not adopting any purpose-built legal tech right now, I suspect most of us are increasingly using ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and the others for basic research. In my case, just last week, I did some quick and candidly slightly panicked research on US trademark law. I just wanted to double check that we were a first to use, not first to file regime, and we are, of course.
Everyone, I think, remembers the first time they interacted with ChatGPT. And to your point, we all knew this is a moment where things are significantly changing. And even so, we truly had no idea what was to come. And it's great that the initial reaction seemed to be folks leaned in. I'm curious for you, and I think this is something legal teams worry about specifically. Did you encounter any initial challenges with the team maybe rushing too quickly into AI and using tools with little oversight?
Well, I'll start by saying we didn't encounter any initial disasters. And obviously, we're all sort of familiar with some things that hit the sort of front page of the newspaper. But and I think lawyers and contracts people, our team included, tend to be fairly cautious group. But that being said, it's still generative AI is absolutely a new kind of animal. So I think we're all used to and have benefited from tools that can search in the text space, that can search, retrieve, process data in an instant. But what separates generative AI tools is that, and including obviously anything that sits on top of an LLM, is that they're stochastic in nature. So unlike conventional deterministic computing, the same inputs will not always, well, in fact, they won't derive the same outputs each time you put it in. So it's not predictable. And it's that randomness, as I understand it. What do I know? But as I understand it, it's basically that randomness that's the magic ingredient for generative AI. So it allows generative AI to get a lot more bang for the buck when it's training on data sets. But it brings about hallucinations. So that's obviously what we're all very concerned with. Given the its hallucinations are its randomness, and it's a feature, not a bug. So any tool that sits on top of an LLM will occasionally provide inaccurate responses. And the developers at OpenAI and elsewhere, they can do incredibly clever things to reduce hallucinations and mitigate against them. In our space, you can build in citations into legal tools, but hallucinations cannot be eliminated altogether ever. And that's where, coming back to us as lawyers and contracts professionals, while you understand the incredible promise of AI, it's a matter of, and I think as a group, we recognize this. It's a matter of proceeding with caution and curiosity.
Really well said. And I think especially the element around hallucinations or inaccurate results is something that's really important to keep in mind. Legal is exciting because it's one of the most high potential areas to apply AI. The thing that's also challenging about it is your contract data, especially, is binary. It's accurate or it's inaccurate. It's not really able to be gray. And so it's so important for us all to have a plan for adopting the technology while taking that human in the loop mindset as well. So I think that's such a great point. And generally, I know Demandbase has really, really thought about AI as a company. I know you're incorporating it into your own platform that you provide clients. Internally, it sounds like it's part of your tech stack. I'd love to hear about the vision for your team as you think about AI for your broader legal tech roadmap, even beyond CLM or contracting tools. How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I would say in the medium term, it's hard to imagine pretty much any software tool, enterprise software tool that's not infused with AI functionality, or at least not one that we would be interested in purchasing. I think it becomes table stakes. But that's not to say that all AI is generative AI. So machine learning, heuristics, and things will still exist and coexist alongside generative AI, and there'll be a place for that. And even within generative AI, I think a lot of tools will become personal to each individual customer. So AI tools will sit inside the organizations, be siloed off, will be customized for those organizations, but they will be largely, I think, firewalled off from outside networks. And I think this is what we are starting to see with the flavor of the 2025. Honestly, the agentic AI.
Yes, agentic AI is everywhere. Everyone's talking about it right now, and it has potential to be so powerful. It's so interesting to be a part of something that's building as we go, right? Like we're still discovering what's even possible, and we're building the plane while we fly, maybe is what I should say. So let's dig into one of your vendors, Ironclad, who is very AI forward, and Demandbase is one of our most tenured customers. To your point, Demandbase was a customer before I even came on board. And so really the platform your team uses today is probably not even recognizable from the original solution you bought. So maybe we can start with, the team's talking about AI, we're testing ChatGPT maybe mostly in our personal lives. When it came time to really thinking about applying AI to a contracting process, how did you identify that initial use case that was the right one to start with?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the same. You have to think about the same thing each time. Anytime you're adopting a new legal technology, you're weighing the expected impact or value you're going to derive from the technology against the costs, and obviously, particularly with AI, the risks on the other side of the ledger. So for our commercial legal team, NDAs were the perfect and obvious first candidate, honestly, first use candidate. So specifically for us, there is and there will always be a high volume of NDAs that come to our team, the vast majority of which are on customer paper. And while, in truth, each NDA may take a lawyer or contracts manager just a few minutes to review, in the aggregate, that time builds up, and so we were spending certainly a non-trivial amount of time every week, every month, every quarter, reviewing and negotiating, in some cases, NDAs. So, and the other thing, of course, is it's a very real gating item for sellers, for our sales organization. It's a material pain point. So they can't move forward with their deal into the next phase with the funnel until they get the NDA signed off. So that's the impact side of the ledger. And then on the cost risk side, candidly, I think lawyers, contracts professionals know that the stakes are typically very low and I'll say with NDAs in the sales context. So nobody is, or at least nobody should be looking to win an NDA negotiation.
Yes, we talk about it with customers all the time. We all need to do NDAs. We all also pretty much know what to expect within an NDA and just need to review it and make sure it's aligned. So it sounds like NDAs, high volume, high impact, since it is part of the sales cycle. And so before you started this more AI powered process, what was the original process for getting NDAs through the legal team like?
So like probably just about everyone on the webinar who's in the commercial legal side of the house, we have what we consider to be a best in class, very concise, perfectly mutual NDA template. And until a year or two ago, we had a policy that requiring sellers to push our paper. And of course, just about every prospect has essentially an equal and opposite policy to that they must use theirs, right? So so even before we implemented the AI review, we had at that point already decided to pull out of the battle of forms on NDAs. So in a sense, I think we were kind of primed to take the next step, I should say, in reducing legal engagement in the process, which was bringing AI into it.
Super interesting, especially because the ease of that NDA step is part of the sales experience when trying to bring on board a customer, but also probably extra important to speed up that processing time for you if it's all nearly third-party paper. So now you're at a place where you've selected NDA as the place to start. How did you prepare and roll out the new AI-driven process?
Well, I'll give you your promotion. So I'll start by crediting Ironclad. When we were looking for our first opportunities to leverage AI about a year ago now, we learned about the combination of Ironclad's AI clauses, which is a feature, and then within the workflow, Ironclad's playbook. And so what we did was we brought in I think ex-Ironclad team to help us, a woman, she's tremendous. So with her help, we used AI clauses, using AI clauses, I should say. We trained the AI playbook, which we have embedded in our Ironclad NDA workflow, and we trained it to detect and red flag for legal review 8, I think it is, problematic clauses, including things like non-solicitation, indemnification, audit rights, non-whitelisted law and venue, and 3 or 4 other clauses that I've missed out here. But the training itself was a super interesting experience. So most of us, to go back to the deterministic computing thing again, most of us are used to just conventional software where you would expect to see linear improvement when you're training and testing. Linear improvement throughout the process. In contrast with AI clauses, the AI clauses would struggle to consistently identify or red flag certain clauses. I think non-compete was one, for example. And in some cases, through the process, the accuracy even regressed for a while. But ultimately, think of as a sort of a meta moment, we used ChatGPT to generate just hundreds and hundreds of NDAs, which we just kind of fed through AI clauses. And so fairly quickly, just with that kind of bulk brute force kind of approach, but still at no cost to us, we got to a point where we were comfortable of going live in sort of the summer timeframe last year. So it just took a few months to sort of work out what we were doing, and the training was quick, relatively speaking. And then we had our AI-enabled workflow, and it was really nice in communicating with our sales team, the launch of it, that we were able to tell them, and obviously we designed it this way, that nothing was going to change in their use of Ironclad. And so they were going to continue to upload NDAs to the same workflow. And the only thing that, we fingers crossed that they would notice was going to be just an improvement in the turnaround times on NDAs, which is what happened.
Spoiler alert. That's awesome. Yeah, so it sounds like you really started, you worked with an Ironclad partner. I know we've talked about that to start with identifying clauses. What do we absolutely need in front of us if it's out of line with our preferred terms within the contract? Training the data. I love that best practice of, volume is going to help making the training more effective. So using ChatGPT to create those is great. And then you move to rollout with the emphasis, hey, sales team, nothing changes in your world. Hopefully just the turnaround time improves, which is the most important thing. Obviously, when rolling out to end users is mostly they just want to hear that they can continue business as usual. That ChatGPT best practice is really excellent as well. So
Right.
Sort of a future state that probably a lot of teams are hoping and wishing for right now. And, we're talking a lot about the sales team. So I know you mentioned your commercial legal team is 3. How large is the sales team you're supporting?
We have, and I couldn't work it out. I was trying to run a report from I won't say what it is, but from our directory, and so I had to literally sort of add it up. But we have about 80 account executives, and then on top of that, we have there are adjacent organizations like think of customer success who, will occasionally bring NDAs to us as well. So potentially we've got NDAs coming in from 100 plus people.
So 3 to 100, it's pretty amazing scale. And it seems like AI has really allowed that scale to continue as the company keeps growing and maturing as well.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned the results have been good. So I would love to dig in there because we've been super impressed. I know we had an on-site with your team a few months back, and when you shared some of the results, it was something we really wanted to celebrate. So what has been the impact on the business with this AI-powered NDA process?
Yeah. So on average, I would say turnaround time for NDAs has gone from 2 to 3 days typically. And again, of course, we all know, as I said before, it is quick, but it's not going to be at the top of your pile. So it would on average take us within our team 2 to 3 days to get to an NDA and return it. It's gone from that to 1 to 2 hours. And within that, it's the legal review time. So a human being involved is typically less than 5 minutes. So if there are any red flagged terms that takes into account that, it includes the reviewing of the flag terms, the redlining within Ironclad, and then the approving of the NDA. So think of it as kind of a 2 to 3 days to 1 to 2 hours. And the biggest thing is sales love it. They're thrilled with the reduction in the turnaround time, and for my team, we love it because we can focus on kind of the more sort of substantive negotiations and the more important work for us.
That's amazing. So huge congratulations to you and the entire team. It's interesting because, sometimes when I talk with customers about AI-powered NDA processes, NDAs that we've talked about are sort of table stakes. Maybe they don't take us a lot of time right now. So there can be a temptation to start somewhere that's, maybe more directly revenue generating. But where I see these quick turnaround times be especially important is end of quarter, right? Because for one seller, they need this NDA to make progress with the next quarter's largest deal, but you might be working on a large enterprise negotiation. So the ability to turn these quickly really allows you to impact revenue in the current and out quarter, which I'm sure the sales leaders love too.
100%. That can be like a weird, but unfortunate and obviously avoidable sort of point of friction with that particular rep, right?
Yeah. So you've really started this journey of AI adoption within legal. And I know for us, our audience always really wants to understand what the real life application of AI looks like. So I'm curious if you have any advice for the audience about applying AI within your legal team.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all have sort of experience with generative AI and kind of things that we're doing with life and sort of surprising things. But yeah, this kind of really narrows your focus. And so, kind of the takeaways from what we've done with the NDAs is, yes, it's incredibly powerful tech, and it's shocking that it can recognize, and it does recognize, all these various clauses and red flags them, and will sort of redline in proposed responses based on, what we've said the fallback positions are in our playbook. But it will make mistakes. And I'd say we get a false positive red flag typically is the type of mistake we get. In our NDA workflow, we probably get it once every couple of weeks, which is not bad. And also, I'll say the learning continues. It gets better as you're telling it that it's made a mistake. That's a particular point of kind of an area where it will improve. But just the fact that it makes mistakes is just surprising. So I'm an older person maybe at this point. So for me, starting with pocket calculators, but for the younger crowd, maybe kind of the calculator app on the iPhone, it never makes mistakes, right? Of course, we're so used to computing technology just being 100% accurate that I think that's something that we just kind of have to wrestle with, that anything that's built on a large language model is going to make mistakes. But, on the balance, of course, you take that into account, but the productivity gains that we're going to get out of AI will just be extraordinary for our profession.
As our technology evolves, our expectations of it and the way we engage with it needs to too.
Yeah.
So what's next? NDAs seem like they're in a pretty great spot. So what use cases are you thinking about in your future roadmap?
Yeah, like a lot of people, I'm getting lots of I'm on this webinar. I would say several kind of try our MSA review app emails every day. So in the near future, we do plan to trial some of the MSA review and drafting tech that's out there, and conversations with peers. There are some people who are real zealots and absolute champions for that technology, and obviously it will be super helpful. Particularly, I believe, and I'm hearing that when it's well integrated with your commercial playbook, it can be fantastic. But for us, right, so we'll be trialing that, and undoubtedly moving forward with that. But for right now, we're working on a project, again, kind of do it yourself sort of thing for us. But we're working on a project to build an AI review of our order forms to flag any non-standard terms for legal review. And kind of, it's a real pain point since I joined the company. I do review every single order form, and happily for our business, there are just a huge number, and 95+% of them are standard template, but they require that step. So I'm just trying to take myself and my team out of that step. So, once we're confident that we've accomplished that, we probably, I can see us enhancing that workflow with an ability for the AI to propose edits to the order form where it finds something that's potentially problematic. And yeah, I think that'll have at that point, that'll have a higher impact for us as a tool than the NDA workflow.
Thinking about that metric is something we talk about with customers a lot. It's something we track at Ironclad, no touch order forms. How many of our deals can we get through the door without looping in legal or deal desk or whatever supporting team? So I think that's a great thing to measure. And I love that you call that out. And you mentioned, order forms could be even higher impact than NDA. Question I have there is, knowing that, would you still recommend teams start with something lower risk like an NDA before stepping into something that might be a flashier project like order form automation?
Definitely. The good and the bad of the order form is it involves actual revenue. So it's kind of live ammunition, so to speak. So we're intentionally limiting it at this stage to issue spotting. and the beauty of the NDA workflow, and that is our first use case, is that it really is doing the heavy lifting and doing the complete entire contract process. For the most part, there are no touches on the NDA workflow, and I think it would be a while before we were completely confident that the order form review could be run autonomously.
It's a great point that to step into AI, it doesn't mean your entire contract process needs to be AI powered. There can be steps where we can take some of the most painful parts or most manual parts and just make them a little bit faster. So, longer term, as you think about AI for commercial attorneys, especially, how do you think about the future state of AI for commercial legal teams?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mentioned AI agents before, and you and I talked about it briefly. I envision a future state in which lawyers and contract managers will work with a variety of different AI tools and agents, and I think they'll vary based on capability and also the range of autonomy we give them. So in some areas of practice, I think like the NDA reviews that we're focused on here, AI will operate with very little human oversight, spot checking at most, I think. And then, but obviously for more complex contract negotiation, AI will be much more of a tool and force multiplier for the legal team.
Awesome. Well, we can't wait to hear what's next with you all and see the progress we make in new use cases together. One topic that comes up a lot for us is thinking about managing risk, AI governance. A lot of us are eager to adopt AI, but legal teams are naturally hesitant, want to be really thoughtful with data. So, can you talk to me a little bit about how Demandbase balances risk management with making sure you're a tech forward, innovative legal team?
Yeah, you bet. First, I'll reiterate that I know when you say it that it's 8 people, it actually sounds larger than I think of it, but 4 on the kind of legal side. So I'll reiterate that we are a small commercial legal team of 3 really, and accordingly, I have, which is good. I get the perspective of both the vendor and the customer. And as a vendor, I will say I get super frustrated when I see prospects send over, AI addenda, which are often just, blanket prohibitions on the use of AI, or some kind of, you've got to give us, 3 months notice if you plan to build AI into your products, and we have to see the blueprints and all the rest of it. But for this conversation, I'll kind of limit the focus to the customer or user's perspective. And I've talked a bunch here about the need to manage for inaccuracies and hallucinations, particularly when the AI is a large language model based tool. But the other perhaps bigger consideration is data use, which you allude to. As an enterprise user, except where it's being used for my exclusive benefit, I absolutely don't want my data being used to train a commercial AI model. I need to know that my data, including the output into the service, is separate and secure. So no ifs or buts there. But I don't want to end on a negative note, or a stern note, I guess. So I do think good AI governance is absolutely not about taking the most risk averse position. As I said at the outset, it's AI is a transformative general purpose technology, so there's no waiting it out. So for this audience, I just encourage that if you aren't already, I would strongly encourage you to survey what's available. And that could be off-the-shelf products, but it could also be using tools like Ironclad has to build into workflows AI features. So as we've done, but survey what's available, identify and kind of focus in on a first use case, and then jump in.
Absolutely. I think it's such a good point, and it's important to be honest with ourselves about what it looks like to really start adopting this and be thoughtful about it. It seems like one area folks are super interested, I'm starting to move into audience questions, is this process you did with the NDA specifically. So there's a few questions around that. Maybe I'll start with this question, which is, what did that look like in practice when you made those hundreds of NDAs to train the AI clauses with?
Yeah, basically we tested them in a sandbox, in an NDA workflow sandbox that we spun up. And so in practice, and obviously in ChatGPT, we prompted them. So we said, you're literally prompting it to say, create create 50 NDAs. In 10 of them include a non-compete clause, and 10 others include audit, terms with audit rights. And so you're basically creating NDAs that you want to trigger to really test the flagging. And so they go into the workflow, and then the AI would learn to identify those clauses and sort of ideally get better and better. And sometimes it would take a step backwards, but ultimately, in aggregate, it's taking steps forward. So yeah, we really bombed that sandbox with just hundreds, probably thousands of NDAs.
Okay. I'm sure there will be some people asking you for some of your ChatGPT prompts later for that, but that touches on another question someone had that's a great question, which is, it sounds like you fed the training with contracts that we would want to make sure are flagged rather than feeding it with primarily contracts that complied with all of your playbook rules.
It's a combination of both, right?
Okay.
So, I mean, and it doesn't have to be in proportion to real life. So you can sort of, feed it more toxic than you would normally expect to, and that's kind of it circles back to, it's NDAs are pretty low risk, partly because we're all good at them. I mean, the templates out there are. It's only the minority of them that have, problematic clauses for us. So, yeah, we would use a combination of ones that were fine. We'd use our own one, possibly redlined as well. So we can also, when a customer does use our one, is prepared to, but redlines changes, it'll flag changes that are problematic, and it won't changes that aren't problematic.
And someone asked a question, generally your approach to NDAs, this person called them CDAs. Is your NDA, would you consider that a narrow scope, a broad scope? How have you designed your NDA?
That person's probably from the UK. I think CDA is confidential disclosure agreement, if I remember my time there. But yeah, I mean, I think our GC, who might be on, Andrew, he and I think of the same mindset, and he's great to work with. And I think we're just very, practical about these things, pragmatic about NDAs. So we have an NDA that is one page. It's absolutely mutual. Obviously, our choice of law, California and San Francisco courts. But aside from that, there's nothing one way about it. And that's what we hope and expect to see in other NDAs. But, the beauty of the AI review is we've taken the time to determine what we think are problematic clauses. And yeah, there are some that we might not want to see, but just in the interests of not overcomplicating and speed, basically we've selected 8 as being, okay, we wouldn't want to sign this.
Great. There's a great question in here from someone who shares, more recently, they've seen an increasing number of clauses and exhibits related to disclosing their company's use of AI in their client contracts. Is this a trend you're seeing commonly in the industry? How does your team approach these disclosures and contracts? And then finally, they asked, is there any risk in disclosing the use of AI, particularly regarding cyber liability? So that's a big question, but curious how you think about this.
Well, as you mentioned, Brooke, as a company, as a vendor, we're embracing AI. Particularly, literally last week, we launched, and there go my comments about trademark review and questions, but we launched a new line of agents called Agent-Base, and so yeah, we're a sort of AI forward company, so we are using it. What we do, and throughout my time and before I joined Demandbase, we do draw a pretty bright line. We draw a bright line to say that we do not use customer data except to provide our services to that customer, right? So, and I think that maps to kind of these questions that we're seeing from customers and prospects about use of AI. Yeah, we use it, but we don't train our AI models except with on your data, except with your written consent.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I know a lot of companies too are starting to have their own landing pages about how they treat customer data as it relates to AI. So that would be the other thing I would recommend is look at some of the leading companies in your space and what documentation they have available online. Might be good guidance too to think about what some of the expectations from customers might start to be. Well, we weren't able to get to all of the questions. There were a lot of amazing questions. We could probably talk about this topic for hours. So if we didn't get to your question, please feel free to reach out to Ironclad. We are always happy to discuss this and any other topics. We recognize that exploring AI applications can be overwhelming, and you're definitely not alone. Thank you so much, Dave, for your time and for everyone who joined us and engaged in the chat. I certainly learned a lot. I believe Michelle's also going to drop Dave's LinkedIn in the chat for anyone who wants to connect with him. I can say, having been lucky enough to spend some time with him, he's a great person to talk all things legal and tech with. And yeah, Dave, thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Likewise, Brooke, please do reach out to me. I've nothing to sell you, so I can just share our experiences, and love talking this stuff, obviously. So really appreciate the time, everyone, and to you especially, Brooke.
Absolutely. Have a fantastic day, everyone. A recording of this will be shared out after if you came late or want to revisit it. And we hope we have the chance to connect with you soon. Bye, Dave.
Bye. Thank you.